But this brings up even a point that I think can encapsulate a lot of the issues in college football. You touched on it. We both touched on it. Governance. Calendar. The calendar in college football is broken. It's totally broken. It's hard to construct a roster. It puts an immense amount of pressure on individuals like yourself, the college coaches. And it also puts an undue amount of stress and pressure on the athletes themselves, in particular prospective student athletes in high school, kids that are trying to transfer. They don't know which coach they're committing to because everything happens all at the same time. The blender of the end of the regular season, when all of a sudden you have early signing day, transfer portal, coaches getting hired and fired and assistants leaving, how do you navigate that?
Well, it's a busy time. It's a busy time. When the early signing period happened, the idea was to take some pressure off of February, that first week in February. And for those who knew that they were going to, to commit, that folks weren't babysitting in January. And so what's ended up happening is I think it's over 90% of all, guys sign in December. If we move it up again, it's just going to move up again. I'm a firm believer that when we make a change, we don't see really the ramifications of that decision for about 3 to 4 years down the road. And every time we make a change, it creates a whole nother set of issues. Mm-hmm. And so we quickly adapt. And, when you're talking about the most competitive environment, in the world, then, guys are going to figure out ways to gain competitive advantages.
Sure.
So while I agree with you, it puts a lot of stress on December. And right now you look at it and say, this is crazy. I think we really have to think through any change that we make right now. Just to say, well, let's move it over here. Let's make this a contact period. Let's do this. We've already had enough change. I've been saying this for years. We don't need to keep changing right now. I think we need to think through, like you said, the bigger picture. If there's going to be some conference alignment, if there's going to be some things like that, then we can start to go down the road of changing things. But as we sit here right now, I'm in favor, as hard as it is, of kind of keeping things consistent right now, the best we can, avoid making too many changes, because so many people come from different angles. That's one of the things I learned. Like if I go to the AFCA convention and the head coaches meeting, there's 100 coaches in there. And there's, big schools, small schools, schools on the West Coast, schools on the East Coast. They all have their own set of issues.
Sure.
And they're all coming from different angles. So to get everybody to come together as one, to come up with answers is a huge challenge. And I think that goes to your point of somewhere coming down the road of figuring out how do we get one voice here so we can all go in the same direction.
And it's fascinating though, you talk about, hey, let's make sure we're taking stock is what I think you're right, of what's going on before we make drastic changes on individual problems. And yet, change is coming. Big Ten's about to grow. USC and UCLA. Yep. The playoff's about to expand, and we have to fix the playoff in terms of build it.
Sure.
Because in 2026, it's going to be a totally new thing.
Yep.
So from your seat, this 12-team playoff, how it's constructed, how it could be constructed, how does it impact you at Ohio State?
I think it's big, and we've already had those conversations. It's right around the corner for us. So I think the first thing is, how you approach the season is going to completely change. For instance, last year we played Notre Dame first game of the year. You start that preparation in June and you're ramped up because that game is critically important. I think maybe if we don't win that game, first game of the year, maybe we don't get into the playoffs. So I think so many of those games, 1 or 2 games could ruin your entire season right now, the way we have it set up. I think the way it's moving forward with the playoffs, the idea is going to be to play your best football at the end of the season. Very much like the NFL. I think about when the Rams won the Super Bowl. I think there was a week, maybe 3 weeks in a row. They had lost three in a row.
Yeah.
That happens in college.
In October, I think it was.
Right.
Yeah.
That happens in college football. Your season's over.
Yeah.
So that's a different approach. I think that probably a lot of NFL teams would tell you, they're kind of feeling their way around in September. They find their identity in October, and then they turn it on in November. Not that that's the way it's going to be in college football, but I think it's going to be more that way. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that playoff system works.
Sure.
The first 4 teams get a bye, the second 4 teams host, and playing a home game in Columbus in December is going to be fun.
Do you like the home environment? Would you like to see him stick with the home environment throughout a couple of rounds?
Gene and I have talked about that, and there's challenges that come with both. I think there's arguments on both sides, but I think to think of playing a home game, playoff game in December at the Shoe was pretty fun to think about. But there's a lot of conversation to be had to get to the final decision on that.
Yeah.